Hello and welcome to Fantasy Focus Football. My name is Daniel Dopp, here with Stephania Bell and Field Jays, kicking it old school in our old studio. Yeah. Back feeling nice and tight with each other. You're definitely going to be able to feel it. It's going to be a lot of fun being able to do this show. We had 2 Monday Night Football games. We obviously have a big injury update, Stephania. You're going to make sure we're all set for that. We got waiver wires. And we're going to talk about some of our biggest gripes with fantasy football. But really quickly, guys, how you doing today?
Well, Stephania is the only healthy 49er left.
That's true. That's true.
As far as I'm concerned, by now you're on the team. Because you might get a call. You might get a call within the next 48 hours.
I'm ready. You know, they tell you, be ready.
You don't have to get ready if you stay ready.
That's it.
That's what the kids say.
That's it. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you know what? Let's just kick this right off. We got 2 Monday Night Football games. We're going to start with Bills Jaguars Monday Night Football recap. Dun-dun-dun.
Hey.
There we go. All right. Start with Bills Jaguars. And this one can be pretty quick. The Bills are a really good football team, and they have a lot of different options for Josh Allen to spread the ball around to.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Also, Josh Allen,
fantasy
good
points.
at fantasy football points
this
week. Remember last week we were like, what happened to Josh Allen? Well, this week, this is why you drafted Josh Allen high as a quarterback.
You know,
maybe number one.
What's fascinating about Josh right now is that it actually hasn't been a banner year for quarterbacks as far as fantasy points are concerned, especially at the top of the heap, right? We've talked about the struggles of Anthony Richardson over the past 2 weeks. Patrick Mahomes yet to reach 17.5 fantasy points. Jalen Hurts going under 11 fantasy points this past week. Not that you need to play well in real life to also earn fantasy points, but what's fascinating about Josh is that Josh is the only quarterback at the top of the heap that has played incredibly well in all 3 games. And I'm talking like incredibly well. It just, in week 2, they did not need him to dominate against the Dolphins.
Exactly.
He was brilliant last night. He is playing the best football of anybody in the league right now. And obviously throwing 4 touchdowns is tremendous when you can get it from Josh Allen, but he reminded us again why he is a dual threat quarterback, added 5 rushes for 30 plus yards. So what a joy to watch. He is excellent. And James Cook, excellent as well. They're giving him so many more goal-to-go rushing opportunities now.
How good is that?
He now has more rushing touchdowns this season than he did in either of the past 2 seasons. So stock continues to go up for James Cook. For Buffalo, I think what it comes down to is, are you starting any of the wide receivers? And it feels like through 3 weeks, if you had your choice, a clear one has emerged. It's Khalil Shakir, right?
Yeah,
and
I don't love that.
I love it. My pick for the Bills wide receiver you most want to roster in the preseason. And I kept coming back to this. There's a rapport there with Josh Allen that literally no other wide receiver on the roster had, as Shakir was the only player amongst the Bills wide receivers to begin the season that had caught a pass from Josh Allen. Now, is he a top 30 wide receiver? No, because he's still, it's like 5, 5, and 3 targets in his first 3 games. It might have been more than 5 last night. It was more than 5, excuse me. But Khalil Shakir, I think, is the best bet to lead them in targets still. 6 targets last night. And then beyond that is what they are doing with Khalil Shakir is very PPR friendly. A lot of wide receiver screens.
Yep.
Catch the ball 2 yards down the field and turn it into potentially a 10-yard gain. So Shakir has been steady. And it was nice to see Dalton Kincaid last night, guys. Catch touchdown.
That's what I was waiting for. I was going to say, I thought of Daniel. At one point, I hear Dalton Kincaid, and I was like, oh, there he is. There he is. Daniel was hyping him up. You were just complaining about his lack of productivity, and I felt like Josh Allen heard you.
I think this is why, the reason why I was disappointed in Khalil Shakir is not because I've been disappointed that he's been able to be good. I love being able to see that. However, I don't want it to be among the wide receivers. I want, like, Dalton Kincaid amongst the pass catchers to be the guy to be more dominant than Khalil Shakir, because he also played last year with the Bills and he had more run with Josh Allen last year than Shakir did.
If you're looking for a silver lining, the good news is with his 1 touchdown last night, Dalton Kincaid now has more combined receiving touchdowns and Travis Kelce.
Yep.
Mark Andrews.
Yep.
Trey McBride, who recovered a fumble in week 2 in the end zone. And obviously Evan Ingram and David Njoku and Jake Ferguson combined.
That's unreal.
It's a really weird year right now for tight ends in fantasy. And there was one more thought that I had in those. Oh, it's Keon Coleman.
Did you know that Keon Coleman did play last night?
Yeah, but after the first quarter. So you heard about that, right?
No.
Oh, no, he was deliberately held out. Brian Dable said it to Sean McDermott. They look very much alike.
Well, he used to be his offensive coordinator.
Morning, right?
Yeah.
I know. And Ken Dorsey with the Browns. But Sean McDermott said that he needed him to be reminded to be on time.
Timeout.
It was about being on time.
Wow.
So got to show up. He only had one catch on one target. It was a 24-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
But I really say that. And God, when you recall things that you mentioned previously, it sounds a little bit too much like victory lapping, which is not the point of this. The point is just like using sort of listening to what the coaches and what the beat writers are saying and doing a little bit of digging on your own. I made the comment a few weeks ago prior to week 1 when we were doing our trust tree for rookie wide receivers, is if you told me there was one of the rookie wide receivers that we overviewed in like the top of the heap, that was a bet to play like 35% of the snaps, I offered up Keon Coleman. And you just listened to the Bills closely during the preseason, and they like the talent, but he did not sound, quote unquote, ready for prime time.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that what happened last night is an indication of what is going to happen every single week. One target for Keon Coleman, but he had 0 points the week prior. Right now, Keon Coleman should be stashed on benches. He's too talented to shut the door on him eventually becoming a bigger part of this offense. But for fantasy purposes, he cannot be started.
Too talented and in an offense that is uber explosive, which is the things you're looking for. A rookie wide receiver being able to come on second half of the year potentially. I'll say this, Phil, just really quickly to that point. I remember Sean McDermott doing an interview or a media day, and the words, I don't know what they teach wide receivers down there, is what stuck out to me as in like, yeah, there's some things this guy needs to learn. It's not that he's not a good pass catcher, not that he's not a good athlete, but there are some things that maybe he wasn't the most NFL ready prospect. And we kind of have seen, unfortunately, that play out. Really quickly, on the other side, you're still starting Travis Etienne because of the wide receiver, or excuse me, the depth of the running back spot. He's still a guy that's going to get a ton of usage here. When you look at these pass catchers, are we back in on Christian Kirk with how bad this Jaguars offense is? Was this a dart throw that just happened to work out in week 3?
I don't know what to make of it. And I kind of want to table all my Jaguars thoughts right now because they don't deserve our air right now.
It doesn't feel like it.
Pathetic attempt at showing up for a Monday Night Football game. They're 0-3, one of 2 teams in the NFL that can say that, and not 3 teams, excuse me, they can say that, and not proudly.
Did you know that Benton Strage has more receiving touchdowns at the tight end spot than...
Unbelievable. The Jags look absolutely terrible right now. They look like the type of team that is ready for an implosion at some point soon. And I will say this, and I am completely befuddled by what Trevor Lawrence is as a player.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. If you're listening or watching this right now, you fill in the blank yourself. Trevor Lawrence is the blank best quarterback in the NFL.
And then tweet at us.
Sure,
let us know. Please let us know because we I had this conversation beforehand. Yeah, let's know. All right.
I don't know the answer.
Let's move ahead. Let's talk Commanders at Bengals. This was the game that actually was fun to watch. I actually sort of stopped watching Bills Jaguars at halftime because the game was already in the bag. Commanders and Bengals, though, was unbelievable. You saw Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase finally look like they were back on track with each other. Jayden Daniels showed you all the things that you thought he was going to be coming into this season. And we finally got Terry McLaurin involved. Phil, let's start there. When we're looking at the Commanders game, I mean, Terry McLaurin finally getting some work here with Jayden Daniels. He even left some on the table with Jayden Daniels missing him on a wide open deep pass that could have resulted in a touchdown as well.
Also tackled at the 1 yard line on a separate deep shot. Here was the important thing from last night. Jayden Daniels, we could talk about him for the entire
He was
show.
great.
But Cliff Kingsbury said he was going to diversify the way he used Terry McLaurin after basically just parking him on the left side of the offense for the entirety of the first 2 weeks. We saw that last night.
Yep.
If you watch that late touchdown, Terry McLaurin was lined up on the right side of the offensive formation. That sounds like a small thing, but it just underscores like they have to get more creative to get their best pass catcher involved. It worked last night, and Commanders fans like just totally revel in the glory right now.
Yep.
You deserve it all.
Congratulations.
Also, I think Cliff Kingsbury listened to Terry McLaurin because Terry McLaurin talked about calling that shot and calling that play. So that wasn't even originally the setup, but there's definitely a chemistry emerging between Jayden Daniels and Terry McLaurin where it felt like once they were unlocked, this is what you're going to see. In other words, not a fluke.
Yep.
I think this is more of how this is going to be built.
Yeah. I love being able to see. It feels like this offense, too, is very predictable when you get to the goal line because you're either going to have Jayden Daniels or Brian Robinson Jr. I know Austin Eckler got in the end zone. Excited to see him. He had a massive kick return as well, which was great.
The concussion.
And we'll continue to mind. That'll be more with Brian Robinson there. On the other side, let's talk Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
Well, you would have thought the Bengals would have won if you just looked at
the stat line is unreal.
You might have thought that they took the game.
324 passing yards and a touchdown for Joe Burrow. Jamar Chase, 6 catches for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns. Let me ask you this, because I think those two guys were kind of as expected. I don't necessarily say as expected, but as expected in my mind going up against this Commanders secondary. When you saw T. Higgins out there, Stephania, was there anything that came to mind watching him in his first game back?
Just that it was his first game back. And I think we said on Sunday to downplay the expectations for him coming off a hamstring injury. I didn't see anything necessarily one way or the other that spoke to his health.
Your guy, Andre Yosevich, got involved.
But I think that is actually the more important thing. I mean, if you were listening to the broadcast, I think it was Lisa Salters mentioned it, that he had made it a case for why he needed to be on the field. What you're looking at me?
No. I agree with you. He looked great.
Because it was like you have to be good enough that they don't want to take you off the field. And, it sounds like he has certainly made a case for being there and being more involved in the offense more of the time.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens with T. Higgins, and I think that with the first game back, I'm not banking too much on that. But I think Yosevich, if you're Joe Burrow, you're certainly confident in his ability to go up and make plays. He did a couple toe tap on the sideline. He had a nice catch down near the goal line, and obviously got in the end zone for him. So,
a quick positive spin here on T. Higgins. He had just one fewer target than Jamar Chase. That's good, right?
That's great.
And he should be even more involved as the weeks go by here. And we have 30 seconds before we move on to the next segment here. Jayden Daniels. 21 of 23 last night. 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown as well. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jayden Daniels. Who am I missing from the top 4 quarterback conversation? And is that the right 4?
I think that's it. I might put Jayden Daniels ahead of Jalen Hurts, to be honest with the way he
How about that?
Season.
How far we have come already on Jayden Daniels. Commanders fans, you deserve it. But just based off of the things that he can do with his legs and the proficiency as a deep thrower, what a night for Jayden Daniels. The Commanders are in first place.
Yeah, when we come back after this break, we're going to talk about the top scoring leaders at each position. Make sure you stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, Field Yates. Guys, if there's one thing that I had to ask you, Field, let me start with you. If there's one thing I had to ask you about fantasy football, what's your biggest gripe with fantasy football so far this year?
It's too predictable.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's just I spend all summer telling you guys what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then the season plays out, and it's like people are like, did you have the script? How did you know that? Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. I feel like you sent out a tweet yesterday, something resulting in that as well, based on seeing a couple of the top of the position scoring leaders.
Yeah, I mean, this was from a tweet from Nick Ercolano, who pointed out that through 3 weeks, Jauan Jennings is wide receiver 4, Dallas Goedert is tight end 1, Cole Kmet is tight end 3, Sam Darnold is quarterback 2, Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 1. That changed after the game last night because Jayden Daniels leapfrogged Sam Darnold. It's just an incredible thing that we see every single year. And it's fun. To me, that's the fun of it, right? It's infuriating when as an analyst, you're trying to get these things right and people get pissed off at you when you don't nail every single call. But the beauty of what we do, the reason why you keep playing in the same league after year after year after year is because you don't have to change a whole lot. Yes, the same 10 or 12 or 16 people all show up, same rules, same format, one time a year you draft, and you let it rip for 18 weeks. What's the most surprising thing, though? You want to start with one position? Sure, go for it.
Let's start with the wide receivers, because when I'm looking at this, there's a top 10 here, Stephania. Okay. If there's one name, I'm just going to list them off real quickly for our audio listeners. Top 10 are Malik Neighbors, Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin, Jauan Jennings, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, Jaden Reed, and Stephon Diggs. One of those things is not like the other.
Who is it? Really, Jauan Jennings.
Yeah, Jennings.
Jauan Jennings, nobody expected, and obviously it's the injuries in the 49ers that sort of elevated his opportunities. But he was making a case for maybe earning a flex in your lineup after week 1.
Yeah.
I mean, because clearly he's involved in the offense. So it wasn't like he came off the bench, but his opportunities grew.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating too. And he, to me, is the least sticky of these 10 names.
Correct.
Just because Debo, we think, is going to be back relatively soon, and we think Brandon Ayuk will get it going. I have no idea what to expect from Ricky Pearsall this season. But if I had told you, like, without the context of anything else, that the 49ers would draft a first-round wide receiver and sign Brandon Ayuk to an extension, 4 years, $120 million, and that Jauan Jennings would be the one that's balling through 3 weeks, it would have sounded very unlikely. So amongst the things that I think are going to stay around for a while that are surprising, I do think it's probably the 3 names at the very top, right? Like, I think the idea of Justin Jefferson being awesome and Nico Collins and DK Metcalf, et cetera, like Malik Neighbors has been terrific so far. The target share, it's exactly what we dreamed of.
Yep.
Rashee Rice feels kind of Amon-Ra St. Brownie to me.
Yeah.
Is that weird?
No, I'm totally with you.
A ton of targets here. So those would be a couple. And then Chris Godwin, Old Faithful, just crushing it so far.
I think the other takeaway there in that group is that you have 2 top 10 wide receivers on the same team. And that's something we talk about not expecting. I mean, we made the case yesterday about why you can't have 3 top fantasy wide receivers in the same team. And it's from this team, the Houston Texans. You have Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs both in the top 10. Tank Dell clearly on the margins.
Yeah.
But is this something that is sustainable? Or do you think this is a function of some of the others that are notably outside the top 10, like CD Lamb? Where are you?
Yeah, they're going to be some that look like...
They're going to bump them down.
Yeah. Some of these are going to look silly at the end of the year for sure, like where they were in week 3 versus where they are at the end of week 18. But both Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins having good enough fantasy production to be lineup locks, to me, absolutely 100% sustainable.
All right, let's talk about the running backs. If you look at the running backs that are in the top 10
a little less surprising.
Yeah, it's pretty much chalk with a handful of names thrown in here. Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall, all those kind of make sense. James Cook, Derrick Henry, then Zach Charbonnet, Aaron Jones, and David Montgomery.
One of us believed in Aaron Jones.
That's right. And one of us believed in David Montgomery for what it's worth. I was all in on him this offseason. Zach Charbonnet, obviously the best recipient of work given the fact that Ken Walker has been out, and he has made the most of it.
Yeah, the big thing the reason why I say this is a little bit more predictable is that in the case of the wide receiver group, you had 2 players specifically, Jauan Jennings and Jayden Reed, who like the overwhelming majority of their production so far came in one game, right? Yeah. Jennings, 46.5 this past week. Jayden Reed, 33 in week 1, just 17 in the following 2 weeks after that. But for the running backs, it's not like you had some spike game and this player has otherwise been irrelevant, right? Zach Charbonnet has played the Kenneth Walker role for 2 straight weeks, plus he scored a touchdown in week 1. Obviously, there is some surprise that only one of Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, and Bijan Robinson is not in this top 10, but Hall's been excellent, confident in Bijan, who I think has been rock solid, and then Christian McCaffrey, we'll talk about him more in a minute, as to me, there's no bigger story in fantasy football right now than the question marks surrounding Christian McCaffrey's health.
All right, so I'm going to say this really quickly, and we don't really have a lot of time to get into it, but the tight end position has just been crazy. I just want to mention them, all right? Dallas Goedert at 1, Brock Bowers at 2, Cole Kmet at 3. Have I gone far enough already? At 4, it's Trey McBride. 5, Isaiah Likely. 6 is Mike Gesicki. 7 is George Kittle. 8 is Hunter Henry. 9 is Zach Ertz. And 10 is Kyle Pitts.
No words.
And 7 is George Kittle without playing in one game, which shows you how bad it is.
It is unreal. I mean, Cole Kmet basically had all of that production in 1 week, and here he is inside the top 10 at the position. It's just unreal here. And quarterbacks look very similar to what you would expect them to be without, Sam Darnold being in there. I don't think any of us expected that. So that's crazy. Fantasy football has just been it's been anything but predictable field. Obviously, a lot of sarcasm in that tweet that you sent out, but it's been crazy so far this year.
Yeah, I think my favorite response to that tweet was like, this is why experts are completely trash, and I don't listen to any of you all the time. And I'm like, okay, fine. You know, I don't like. You don't have to listen to us. That's your prerogative,
that's fine.
right?
That's fine.
I tell you all the time that like I am guessing here, right? Like I don't control the outcome of these predictions that we make. I am doing my best to give you my best educated guesses, but I'm going to miss. And you got to be like a baseball player. You got to have that you strike out in the first at bat, and you're coming up the next at bat, and you're saying, bye-bye. See ya. Home run.
Here's the point. We're all subject to the same rules. Like, we don't get to play fantasy football any differently than any of the rest of you.
Nope.
So when we're as surprised as you are, we're making the same decisions. We're having to battle the same, lineup adjustments and waiver wire challenges and all of that. So
yeah, as long as our batting average is better than Mike Clay, that's all that we're really hoping for.
We are.
That's all we're aiming for in life.
That's right.
Mike Clay's actually having a pretty good run, I got to say.
He is.
Start of the season. He's good.
Except for in our Fantasy Focus Show League. All right, when we
talk about that.
We will do a deep dive into a handful of injuries. We're going to be answering the bell. Stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, and Field Yates. Stephania, the old answering the bell segment, we're bringing it back.
It's just
not old.
49ers health updates. Because we have more than enough time.
I was smiling.
Or we don't have enough time.
I got to get serious.
All right. You want to, let's start. See, look at that. We even have an animation.
I love it.
Bell right there.
A little bell. I heard a bell in that.
You got the big bell right here. The arrowhead gone.
I know it's being hidden.
Yeah, it helps prop up our championship belt here. All right, let's start with some 49ers updates. Stephania, this is going to take a little bit of time. I'm just going to hand over the microphone and let you go here for a minute.
Okay, where to begin? I'm going to save the lengthy one for last. Brock Purdy shows up on the injury report. We did not expect that. Back soreness. So cue the comments about, yes, I didn't even get to the countdown, and there you are. Day to day, the good news is MRI was negative. I am told that the expectation is he will be able to go this week.
Okay.
So
Good.
His name is on there. I'm sure he's sore.
Okay.
And tired.
Yes.
And stressed and all of those things. But as far as availability and for what it means for all the rest of the 49ers, expect Brock Purdy to be the quarterback this week.
Okay.
George Kittle making progress with the hamstring. And it sounds like there's hope that he could return as soon as this week. So let's see what he does in practice, but that's encouraging. The big news really for the 49ers was some news that broke yesterday about Christian McCaffrey traveling overseas to see a specialist. Now, there was a photo taken of Christian McCaffrey in an airport, and the person who photographed this and posted it on X said that he was boarding a flight to Munich and Christian McCaffrey was there. So it was confirmed that the photo was real. Kyle Shanahan did then confirm to reporters yesterday that McCaffrey traveled to Germany. I will give his quotes here. He said, "I'm not sure what doctor it is, but he said to see a specialist that I believe will help him with his Achilles process." And then added, "I think he's doing that over these next few days, and hopefully it will help." So here's what I have to say about this. Without knowing exactly who McCaffrey is seeing, we can't say with any specific knowledge what treatment he's undergoing.
Okay.
But what I will tell you is that there have been athletes in the past, including Kobe Bryant, who have traveled to Germany to a particular clinic that treats athletes and others for problems related to arthritis or chronic conditions. And it involves it involves a treatment of using your own blood cells to cultivate healing factors that help combat inflammation. And that's really just the simplest way for me to put it.
Okay.
And it involves, they harvest the blood cells. They are then cultivated for these healing factors and then injected back in to hopefully help with inflammation. Why does it matter with what McCaffrey's dealing with? Because we heard that he has Achilles tendonitis on top of the calf issue, which is where this all began. And the Achilles tendonitis is more of a concern because whether you believe it's truly tendonitis, which is more of an acute inflammation of the tendon, or whether you suspect that he has chronic changes of that tendon based on the athlete that he's been for years, and then an acute inflammation on top of it, it's hard to get better when that process is going on. And this is an area that doesn't have a great blood supply. Sometimes it's difficult to heal. And when you're someone like Christian McCaffrey, you want to exhaust every possibility to try and help resolve the issue so you can then get back to the business of playing football. So the hope would be that this does help him out and that he can then return. Like, I don't see this as potentially as alarming as what it sounds like when you hear the news.
Thank you, because when I hear that, and you can tell me why I'm just a dumb idiot fan here, but when I hear a tendonitis situation in running backs, I think of the great Todd Gurley, who obviously had his career cut short because of tendonitis. I don't think it was the same kind of tendonitis that CMC was dealing with, but it just makes me nervous.
And I don't know that it was fully tendonitis. But okay. I think, tendonitis is a term that gets used a lot.
Okay.
You'll hear it like whenever there's an irritation in the region of a tendon, you'll hear the term tendonitis. And you can get into the weeds about, again, chronic tendon issues, tendinopathy, tendinosis. They're all different types of problems. But the bottom line is that you're trying to get this acute situation, meaning the recent situation, to resolve. If there is inflammation, to get it to resolve to the point where you can then perform functionally again and resume your activity. And it's a balancing act. It's very hard. And the reason I say I'm not that alarmed is because, and I'll just emphasize again, we don't know exactly where he's gone for treatment. But if in fact, if you connect dots, and this seems like the most likely thing, there is some published data on this. There's been some success with it. And so this is not, why do people travel outside the U.S.? This is something else that we get asked. And there are things in the process that may not be consistent with what is FDA cleared in this country. So that is why people will travel.
Yeah, I was less alarmed than most for one specific reason. And again, I'm not Stephania, but I have listened to her in the past, and I've heard this from other people. That Christian McCaffrey is obsessive and maniacal with his health in a way that very few other athletes are, that he's willing to turn over a stone and make the, whatever it is, 10-hour flight to Munich, that others may just say, hey, I understand that it could help, but that seems like a bridge too far for me. Sure. So I categorize this just as much as another example of how McCaffrey is doing literally everything in his power to get this resolved and figured out, much more so than he suffered some sort of setback, things are getting worse, and the only option left over is to try this because nothing else has worked to this point.
Here's where the timeline matters. It was August when we heard about the calf. And then we heard from Shanahan that he was not going to be practicing, that he was going to be rehabbing with the goal of being ready by week 1. But when week 1 came and he then tried to test it, he'd only been practicing for a couple of days with the team. It then flared up. And it was that moment, if you're Christian McCaffrey and you realize, remember Shanahan said it was the worst pain that he'd experienced to date with that problem, that you go, okay, well, whatever I was doing wasn't working. So now I've got to try the next thing.
Yeah.
Gosh. All right. We're going to continue to monitor that one.
Stay tuned. But again, I guess I don't, this to me isn't the end of the world. It's just him trying something new.
All right. I want to throw to a Twitter question that we got. We got a mailbag we're going to do at the end of the show here. But Stephania, this question came in from Tim W. Says, Evan Ingram has now missed 2 games because of an injured hamstring. How bad is this, and when should we expect him to be back and ready to play? What do you have on Evan Ingram?
Well, we don't know the severity of it because no one has relayed that specifically. But it sounds like, from what I've been able to gather, that the team was hopeful that resting him this week would allow him to be ready to potentially return next week. So if that's the case, then it was of the more mild variety of hamstring strains. So let's watch the practice reports, see if he comes back. As you know, the pattern, you come back, you try and practice, you see if you can get through it without a setback, sort of a la T. Higgins.
Yep.
And then you test it when you return.
Well, we could use it at the tight end position. A little consistency there would go a long ways for us. All right. Speaking of tight ends, can we talk about Sam Laporta? Sam Laporta, I saw, had a low ankle sprain, it looked like. How am I supposed to feel about that as not just a Lions fan, but as someone that has Sam Laporta in a handful of leagues?
Well, I think people associate high ankle sprain with longer injury and low ankle sprain with a shorter window to return.
Please tell me that's true.
Well, it's not necessarily true. It depends on the degree of injury. But all the rumbling out of...
Geez, Stephania. Have a little bedside manner. My gosh.
I prefer honesty and truth.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
All right.
And then you can do with that what you will. But it does sound like they don't think it's particularly serious. Then it just becomes a question of functionality. Can you play with it and not risk further injury? I would say that it sounds, based on how Dan Campbell was talking, like they're fairly positive on it.
Okay.
Day to day.
If he does not go this week, obviously Jameson Williams, it seems like, would be the guy that would see an uptick in targets. I'm not sure how you throw the ball much more to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So he seems like the guy that would be the recipient of that there.
Yeah, I know that Sam Laporta hasn't been that busy so far this season, but if he's unavailable on Monday night, it does mean that others have the opportunity to get peppered a bit more with targets. Amon-Ra and J-Mo, probably the biggest beneficiaries, along with Jahmyr Gibbs, who has been busy so far in the passing game, but could seem even more in week 4.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk week 4 waiver wire, getting you set up for all of the claims you need to put in. Make sure you stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus, Daniel Dopp, Stephania Bell, and Field Yates. Guys, we're in week 4. And it finally feels like we have a waiver wire that is like robust enough to be excited about a little bit. There's a handful of names on here.
Interesting names here this week. Obviously, none more so than a certain wide receiver who had literally more points last week than any other player.
Is this the guy that you told everyone last week, hey, be aware this guy might be good at football. You should probably add him and even consider starting him. Is that the guy you're talking about?
Jauan Jennings, who obviously crushed it this past week for the 49ers. And, it's Monday. It's Tuesday. So we'll see how things shake out this week. But when Kyle Shanahan initially discussed or disclosed Deebo Samuel's injury, he said it was going to be a couple weeks. So is it possible Deebo plays this week? Yes. Is it possible he sits? Also, yes, right? So Jauan Jennings, who, if nothing else, has earned more opportunities in this offense, even when Deebo is back healthy, should be added. I don't really know exactly what to make of this Patriots defense right now. They have at times looked solid, and then they got carved up by the Seahawks passing game in week 2. They also have a lot of injuries on that defense, and I don't think Jauan Jennings is likely to draw a Christian Gonzalez shadow. I think that would more likely go to Brandon Ayuk. So Jauan Jennings, assuming Deebo Samuel is out, will be a top 20 wide receiver play for me this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. Only rostered in 36% of leagues. So there's a chance that someone in your league already listened to Fieldwin and grabbed them last week. But in case that didn't happen, make sure you go check it out because he's the top wide receiver that we'd be adding off the waiver right now.
Yeah.
If there was a second one that I was going to look at, for me, it would be Wan'Dale Robinson.
A lot of targets.
He's getting a bunch of targets in this offense.
In 2 of 3 games. 8+ in 2 of 3 games.
And I realize that quarterback position may not, instill a lot of confidence in you. However, Daniel Jones able to elevate and keep Malik Neighbors. I mean, Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 1 right now through the first 3 weeks of the season. So being that so much attention is being paid to Malik Neighbors, I think you can at least throw a dart if you need a guy at the wide receiver spot with Wan'Dale Robinson getting the volume and target share that he has. Is there anyone else in this list that you really like, Field?
Well, this is important, though, on Wan'Dale before we let it go by. Remember when the Vikings had both Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison, and they switched from 4 to 2? And so they both had single-digit numbers. Yep. They both had the same stance. They both had the same hair, and they played the same spot. And it was like when Madison would come in, if he'd have like a 12-yard run, you'd be like, all right, Dalvin got 12 more yards. Then you'd be like, wait, that's Alexander Mattison?
Dang it.
It's not quite as close as that. But Wan'Dale Robinson, because he wears a number that begins with a 1, 17, and because he has that same sleeve, the red sleeve that Malik Neighbors wears.
Yep.
Because they play wide receiver where they're doing they're catching passes in traffic, it's harder to tell exactly who you're looking at and the size and stature of that player. Sometimes you confuse me.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors. And Wan'Dale, not as explosive or shifty as Malik, but he's a second round. He's a legit athlete. He was a sick receiver at Kentucky. He's a capable player. So yes, important to add there. Everything else, Daniel, I would say is dart throwing.
Yep.
The names that we had on that list for those that weren't watching, Michael Wilson, who had 8 catches this past week, Jalen Naylor, who scored in each game this season, but has turned 3 of his 7 targets into touchdowns. That's not sustainable, obviously. Yep.
Yeah.
Jalen Tolbert showing a few signs of life for that Dallas offense, had a touchdown this past week. And then Tutu Atwell, who led all Rams receivers, both in terms of catches and yards. I would say those 4 much more dart throwy, the first 2 bigger priorities this week.
I'm with you on that. Let's talk about some running backs where Rico Dowdle kind of took command of that Cowboys backfield. However, I'm not sure if there's here's what I'll say. Rico Dowdle rostered in 37% of leagues. Cam Akers rostered in 34% of leagues. Bucky Irving rostered in 32% of leagues. And then you got Braylon Allen, 28%, and Tyler Beatty. Bucky Irving actually is the guy that I would want to be adding for potential long-term stash. I want to ask you, though, do you feel any differently? I mean, would you guys, either one of you guys, would you rather go with that running back by committee situation in Dallas?
Well, what happens if Dalvin Cook gets introduced?
Well, it's going to be even worse.
I mean, I'm just saying that's a possibility. He is there now. And so I keep me far, far away.
Yeah, I don't love
What do you need right now? Because I think there's a chance of the 5 names that you just mentioned that the most opportunities could go to Cam Akers again this week, right? Because D'Amico Ryan's non-committal once again on Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce when asked yesterday. Pierce is dealing with a hamstring injury. This is, I think, 4 straight missed practices for Pierce. Mixon missed all of practice last week.
Yeah, high ankle sprain. I would expect him to be out.
So there you go. You can make the case that if you need somebody because you have a Joe Mixon or you have a running back malaise right now in one of your 2 spots, that Madison would be the most useful week 4 player. But I think 2 names further down that list are interesting, to your point, Daniel. Bucky Irving has my attention Very much so. Bucky Irving is the player that you add even if your running back room looks fine right now.
I agree.
Just go check through 3 games this season. Rachaad White is averaging 2.2 yards per carry. He does not have a rush of even 15 yards. Bucky Irving is averaging 6.1 yards per carry.
Behind that same offensive line?
Same offensive line,
okay.
Same scheme. And it's not like, I used to talk about this with Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott. Like, Pollard was so much more efficient, but they were like designing runs for Tony Pollard that were just more conducive to big plays, like perimeter runs and pitches and things that with guys of Tony Pollard's caliber of athlete, like that's just a better bet to pick up 5, 6, 7, 8 yards. Zeke was just doing like the hammer runs between the tackles. Bucky Irving is a very, very good between the tackles runner for a guy who is very small as well. Todd Bowles has already said this week, we think that Bucky Irving has earned more opportunities going forward. Rachaad White is a fascinating player to me. You could make the case that if you're in a pretty good spot at running back and someone else in your league is not, that you could dangle Rachaad White for a receiver, or if there is a single tight end that actually exists, a tight end as well, because I think Rachaad White has the potential to continue to be a declining asset. Yeah. He's been a tough guy to totally size up because his rushing efficiency is so poor that he had 5 catches for 18 yards last week. But if you're clinging on to that kind of passing game utilization, maybe a decent number of targets, but basically all dump off city, which is what it was last year, to me, that's not a high upside player like he was last season.
I'm totally with you on that one. The eye test when I watch these two play, Bucky Irving just looks much better in this backfield than Rachaad White, who, and I mentioned it in the show yesterday, like the reason why it felt like he was so good last year was just the massive amounts of volume that he got. He's not getting that same kind of run this year. All right, let's look at the quarterback spot. If you need a handful of quarterbacks, some to consider this week. Geno Smith going up against the Detroit Lions. Justin Fields, who continues, it seems like, to be the starter in this offense, guys.
Will be until they lose a game, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and we don't know if and when Russell Wilson will be ready. The reports are that he's making progress, but there is zero indication that there would be a change, whether he's healthy enough.
Yep. You got Sam Darnold, who I think is finally starting to make people pay attention to what he's been doing. Malik Willis would be tough for me because we're waiting word on what's going to happen with Jordan Love. But if you need someone this week, you could potentially wait and see what's going to happen at that quarterback position.
Yeah, everything points to Jordan Love returning this week from that MCL sprain. And just a mention on Sam Darnold, called a bruise on his knee, a little bit of a scare last week. No structural damage.
Sam Darnold was top 5 in week 2, top 10 in week 3. I mean, he continues to light that Vikings offense on fire in a positive way.
Yes, and he has a chance to be what I think we've seen from Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield the past 2 seasons. The guy who starts hot and finally lands in a good situation. And you say to yourself, like, 1 weekend, anything can happen. It's the NFL. 2 weeks in, it's like, yeah, but do it against real competition. And by the way, the 49ers are very much real
competition. Yeah.
3 weeks in, you start to say to yourself, like, is this going to sustain? There's no way this can sustain, right? We've been down this path before with comparable quarterbacks. He might just be that quarterback who hangs on. He's obviously not going to impact the game as a runner, but in a year in which we've seen superstar fantasy quarterbacks struggle, Sam Darnold officially has me interested. And I will say this, we often talk about how in leagues that we play in, if we have a good quarterback, if we have an Allen or a Mahomes or a Lamar or a Jalen Hurts, where you're probably not ever asking the question, who am I starting and who am I sitting? Then you don't bother with that second quarterback. I've often found, though, in leagues I play in, that almost everybody else wants 2 quarterbacks.
Yep.
So adding a Sam Darnold as an insurance policy, or if he stays hot and you can parlay him into something down the line if somebody else has a struggling starter or eventually an injury starter, I think is not a terrible strategy. Of the names that you just listed, he was the most intriguing to me.
I am with you on that. I'm telling you right now, there are people that are going to be making decisions. Do I continue to start Anthony Richardson or do I start Sam Darnold? Do I continue to start Patrick Mahomes or do I start Sam Darnold, which feels crazy to do?
Listen, I'm the Anthony Richardson guy around here. I guess we are the cohorts. We're the cabinet. Anthony Richardson.
Right.
And I did it last week. I played Jared Goff over him in a league. And not that it's
not like Jared Goff was awesome, but he was better than Anthony Richardson.
Better than Anthony Richardson. And against the Steelers this weekend, I shouldn't say this publicly, but I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, don't feel good about it. All right, let's look at some tight ends as well. If you need a couple of tight ends, guys that you have at your disposal, Cole Kmet, Tyler Conklin, Cade Otton, and Noah Fant.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? I mean, if you're picking one of these, we saw both Cole Kmet and Tyler Conklin do some things this week. Cade Otton is the king of being on the field and not actually having any work in the passing game. I mean, he's out there all the time. To me, it's one of those top two guys, Cole Kmet or Tyler Conklin. Cole Kmet led me to a victory this week when I had to replace Evan Ingram late. So
nice pivot right there. Thank you. Because there are so many options you could have turned to besides Cole Kmet. Like, yeah, that is nailing it. Well done.
Thank you. I just for what it's worth, I definitely predicted the 350-yard passing game from Caleb Williams this week. So.
Did you?
Yeah, not really. Not really. Hey, sometimes you throw darts and they work out. That's why it's called a dart throw, guys.
Just as an aside, Cole Kmet, good podcaster as well. He works with CHGO. That guy's got some serious media chops. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
That's a complete aside. I don't know. Like,
nothing to do with adding him in fantasy, but
it hasn't influenced my ranking amongst tight ends yet, but I just wanted to shout out Cole Kmet.
Better fantasy player than podcaster. Travis Kelce, better podcaster than fantasy player?
I'm leaving that one alone.
All right.
Don't touch that. You could, you don't want.
I don't want that. I don't
want
that
what that brings.
Guys. Come on. Come on.
Want what that brings.
Jokes. There's all jokes. All right. When we come back, we got a fantasy focus mailbag. People asking us questions for what they should be doing in week 4 and beyond. Stick around. Back here on Fantasy Focus, we got a mailbag here. A bunch of questions that people have asked us. This is going to be a ton of fun.
Spicy ones.
Yeah, there's some real spicy questions in here. All right, we're going to start at the top.
Evil for asking these questions.
I know, it's evil. All right, Nathan, off the top, wants to know, rest of season, can you please rank CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, and Malik Neighbors in a 1-point PPR league? Is it wild to think that CeeDee is number 3 on this list, rest of season?
It's not totally wild. If I had to rank them the rest of this season, I would go CeeDee Lamb.
Ooh.
Yep. I'm holding the faith there.
Okay.
Just because we know the potential. And the Cowboys have faced just a brutal start in terms of defenses that they have played so far.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Rashee Rice, number 2.
Yep.
And I'm going to go with Malik Neighbors, number 3.
There's not a bad option among them, though.
But the more important point, and I love these kind of questions from Nathan. Like, he wants me to answer concretely, and I'm going to give that. My answer concretely is CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, and Malik Neighbors. That is my list. The reason being that I have seen CeeDee Lamb go nuclear in a way that I do think is possible once the Cowboys kind of get on track offensively, that I have not yet seen from Rashee Rice or Malik Neighbors. Not blaming them. They've only been in the league for a combined, 35 games, all right? Less than that, 25 games. I can't do math. The point is that Rashee Rice is the old guy, and he's in his second season.
Yes, right.
Rashee Rice gets the benefit of the doubt because I trust his quarterback just a touch more than Daniel Jones. I know that Daniel Jones has not held back Malik Neighbors. He is quite literally wide receiver 1 so far. But I think the floor in a weekly basis is a little bit higher for Rashee Rice than Malik Neighbors. And then Malik Neighbors, who I love, is number 3 of this list. Here's the more important thing. You've got 3 megastars.
Yep.
Megastars in your lineup. Like, Rashee Rice and Malik Neighbors look like some of the best value picks already in the entire NFL.
Yeah.
You think that's really Nathan's lineup, though, or is he just asking?
I was wondering if he wanted to make a trade or do something like that. But if he,
but it's a totally conceivable lineup.
It is possible.
Yeah.
That could have played out.
If you have that, good on you.
You're in good shape.
You're in a really great shape. All right, next question. First one comes from Spencer. They're kind of 2 back-to-back here. One, why does Baltimore hate Mark Andrews? And the second question we have is from Dylan, wants to know, is Mark Andrews the ultimate buy low guy? Stephania, do you want to answer either one of those? Why do they hate Mark Andrews?
Well, John Harbaugh was asked about this. I don't think the question was framed about why do you hate him, but it was essentially getting at that. And he gave the answer that everyone who rosters him in fantasy does not want to hear, because what he talked about was how great Andrews was on blocking this week.
Oh, great.
And that he was out there, and if you saw him, he was out there playing, but that's just the way the game went. And Harbaugh will not come off of that. It was basically like, he goes, sometimes, the game is going to flow a certain way. He said Mark Andrews did what we wanted to do, and then he raved about his blocking. So as a fantasy manager, it makes me concerned, because what if that doesn't change? There's no effort. There was no indication of we are going to try to put the ball in his hand.
All right. So does that make
that's what you were looking for?
Is he the ultimate buy low then with that statement? I don't think so either.
I love John Harbaugh. I think he's an outstanding football coach. I think he's a great man as well, and an excellent leader. I'm saying all the nice things that are important to say.
I know where you're going with this.
For fantasy football purposes, I think he's trolling us.
Oh.
Like during the summer, Justice Hill, he's our starting running back as well. Hey, we didn't sign Derrick Henry to carry the football 30 times a game with him, right? 5 days later, Derrick Henry has 25 carries and a catch as well. So I don't buy much into the coach speak from John when he talks about how great the blocking was or anything else. Again, amazing football coach. The guy's a stud. He is not the ultimate buy low for me. Something's going on with Mark Andrews right now. And the secret sauce of the recipe for this offense, all things being equal, in a lot of weeks will be kick the crap out of the defense with the running game.
Yep.
And Lamar will be opportunistic in the passing game. That may not be the case on Sunday night against the Buffalo Bills because they may not have a choice but to play a shootout game against that excellent Buffalo offense. But it's hard for me to envision right now that Mark Andrews pays off based off where he was drafted, given how slow of a start it's been.
I agree that it's hard to envision that, but I'm curious what you think is going on that's wrong with him.
I have zero clue.
Yeah.
Because I was
flummoxed.
the first week, I'm telling you, I was with you because I thought he looked a little bit fatigued. He wasn't in the whole time, but he's been playing more. He's just not playing the way that we've been accustomed to.
Right.
And if there was truly a health issue, I feel like he'd be out of the lineup more. Like, I don't think it's that he can't do what he needs to do, but there's something missing. And I don't know what it is. Very bizarre,
yeah.
All right, no more questions. I'm going to throw this one out there. We don't have to throw up the question on the screen. Joseph Eston wants to know, I have both Gibbs and Montgomery on my team. Can I comfortably start both Lions? Only if you like top 20 running back.
Yeah, I was going to say yes. Deal. There's nothing to suggest you shouldn't now.
That's it. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We're going to be back tomorrow. Me, Field, and Mike Clay, while Stephania gets all the injury updates. And there's going to be a lot of them. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a lot.
Somebody suggested I get a weighted blanket.
You know what? Not a bad idea. Just like cuddle up in that and feel some warmth and comfort for once.
A dark corner.
Deserved.
All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here on Fantasy Focus. Don't forget to love each other. Be kind to yourself. Go out there and put in some waiver claims. We'll see you guys tomorrow.